Welcome to this author's interview series. My name is Christina Theodoraki. I'm editor of Small Business Economics and Entrepreneurship Journal, and I have the great honor to interview today Tobias Schlegel and Uschi Backes-Gellner from University of Zurich. Welcome, Tobias. Welcome, Uschi, and thank you so much for accepting to give this interview today and share your insight with us and with our listeners and readers.
Thank you, Christina. We are happy to be here.
So Tobias and Uschi are going to give us more insight on their very recently published paper in Small Business Economics. The paper is entitled "The Role of Fields of Study for the Effects of Higher Education Institutions on Regional Firm Location." The paper is published in August 2023. And I will very quickly start my first question. We would like to hear more about the paper. What is the central idea? What is the paper about?
So, broadly speaking, we focus on the effects of universities of applied sciences and their effect on regional firm location. And universities of applied sciences are higher education institutions in Switzerland that teach and conduct applied research. And in our analysis, the regional economic effects of applied sciences, in our analysis of the regional economic effects of University of Applied Sciences, we focus or we highlight two sources of heterogeneity. The first source is that we focus on the heterogeneity from UASs or from Universities of Applied Sciences in different fields of studies on which these UASs focus. And these fields of study are as diverse as chemistry and life sciences, business management services, but there are also universities of applied sciences that focus on music, theater, or social work. And the different focus on fields of studies, they also imply that these universities of applied sciences, they produce different human capital and different knowledges that, or knowledge that spills over to the regional economy and impact regional firm location. So this is a first source of heterogeneity in these effects of Universities of Applied Sciences on regional firm location. And then we focus on the second source, which is on the side of the receiving firms in the industries, and we focus there on the differences across these industries where the firm location is taking place. So different industries, they require different knowledge inputs from higher education institutions, and we expect that regional firms' location across industries would be different, caused by these different inputs needed for the firms across different industries. So consequently, the impact of Universities of Applied Sciences, or we expect that the impact of Universities of Applied Sciences will differ across the different focus of fields of studies and the different industries that are affected by this University of Applied Sciences.
So maybe I may add, what is the difference also to the work that has typically done before? They have looked into higher education institutions in general and have looked at average effects that they may have in a region. So now we say, well, that's nice to have these average effects, but they may not be the same depending on what these higher education institutions do, and they may not be the same depending on what you have in the region already. And that's why Tobias then looked in his work, in our work, on, so what is the difference if we have different fields in that universities? And that maybe, and we assume so, depends on what you find in the region. And if there is a better match, we expect the effects to be higher. If there's no match, maybe there's no effect at all, or even a negative effect. That's what we said. We have to look into that. We cannot go or stay with these average effects that we know they are there. But if you think about policy, well, you want to know better how you could move forward and get the best for your region.
Thank you very much, Uschi, for complementing also this first question. And actually, this was my second question and interrogation. We understand why higher education institutions are extremely important for regions, but why it is important to study the effects of higher education institutions in regional film location, and why this article became important, what is the originality of this article, and what we can learn more from what is already published in already research discussion.
So the main contribution is actually that we really focus simultaneously on these two different sources of heterogeneity that I mentioned before, and that's actually the contribution of our paper. So there were papers before that focused on different fields of study of mostly academic universities, but they often are limited to some subset of fields of studies of academic universities. And our contribution on this side of like the first source of heterogeneity is that we can really analyze the entire set of different fields of studies across these universities of applied sciences. And on the other side, on the second source of heterogeneity, where we look into industries, our contribution is that we also can like show the entire subset of industries in an economy, while earlier papers mostly focus on, for example, only the manufacturing sector or only on knowledge-intensive business services, so a very specialized subset of the industry. And we can show on both sides, on the knowledge output from the University of Applied Sciences and on the knowledge input side of the firms, we can show the entire set of possibilities, more or less. And the second contribution is that earlier studies mostly focus on academic universities. However, they produce a very different kind of knowledge, and their knowledge and the human capital is focused on a very different set of industries than these universities of applied sciences that, in contrast to academic universities, teach and conduct applied knowledge. So this is a very particular kind of tertiary institution that has not been studied so extensively in the past.
Let me go back to the very early beginning. A lot of times in entrepreneurship, we say that we have a lot of ideas, but only some of them will reach and be successful ideas. We can consider that the idea of this article was successful because the article has been published. Can you tell me where does the idea came from? What made you say we're going to work in this paper? What was the initial observation that bring you together to build and conduct this study?
So, I mean, I can tell you how the particular research question evolved, and then maybe Uschi can talk a little bit about the entire strand of research that we do at our chair that focuses on universities of applied sciences. So we've published papers before at our chair that focus on these institutions of universities of applied sciences, and they focus mostly on innovation effects of these universities of applied sciences. However, both when we discuss these things internally, but also when we presented the papers at the international conferences, we often get the question or the remark that it would be interesting to look into a broader set of fields of studies. We limited these fields of studies in the earlier publications because it doesn't make sense to study innovation effects of a University of Applied Sciences in social work. However, if you broaden up the effects on the regional economy, it makes sense to also broaden up the fields of study that you analyze in your study. And these comments that we constantly get on our earlier paper were like the initial, or gave us the initial idea to develop this research question further and open up both the focus on the fields of studies of these universities of applied sciences, but also open up on the regional economy effect side and look into broader measures.
So it was actually inputs from two sides that made us start that new project. So the one input is really from the academic side and the journal processes and the conferences, where we were pointed to that shortcoming. Why do you always concentrate on the STEM fields and the patenting? Well, because that's easiest and that's what everybody does. But still, the question came, so why do you not look into the other fields? But then, of course, you have to have a totally different research approach for the other fields. And then also from the practical side, from the policy side, of course, there's a large number of universities of applied sciences or even universities that are in specializing in different fields. So the policymakers, they also want to know. So now it's nice to know from you what we have in STEM fields, but we have all these other institutions. So what about those? Don't they also have effects in the region? Yes, this is right. Both of these comments are good, but then if we think about the broader spectrum of fields, we cannot concentrate anymore on the patents. That's obvious. Why? That's what Tobias meant when he said, well, how about social work? Are they having effect on patents? That's not even fair. They don't even intend to patent. So we have to find a measure that would then apply across all these different fields. And that's how we came up with, well, why don't we then just take any type of new firm that was established in a region? We don't even care what the firm is, but if they have an effect from social work or from the creative industry, then hopefully it's at least some small firm startup that then was built in the industry that now employs social workers, or that now has more workers in the creative industry. And that's how we came to that new question. So if we want to look at all the fields, which is a very reasonable question, you have to go on a different output measure. And that's why we came then to the question of how does it affect the number of firms in a region, which is always a very good indicator and which allows to take into consideration all the different fields that you may have.
Then there is a second reason why we pushed forward this research question. We had a paper before where we first analyzed heterogeneity in the effects of universities of applied sciences. And we, from earlier studies at our chair, but also from a lot of studies in the field, we know already a lot about average effects of tertiary education institutions, be it academic universities or universities of applied sciences. However, we really don't know a lot about the heterogeneity in these effects. And the interesting thing to look into heterogeneity is that it gives you a first glimpse of what could be underlying mechanisms that we don't understand yet, how these tertiary education institutions really impact the regional economy. So focusing on these heterogeneities, like a logical next step after we have analyzed the effects on average, and now we can do a deep dive and look more into detail what the underlying mechanisms.
Excellent. Can you tell me, what do you think the topic will be heading? What are the future avenues? Do you have any ideas? You're working to extend the study, but you have probably neglected to see, and you would like to encourage like future researchers to dig deeper. So what's your suggestions for future research agenda?
So the mechanisms that I mentioned before is I think one important avenue for future research, because we see that these tertiary education institutions have positive effects on the regional economy. However, we don't really understand yet in detail why or where these positive effects are coming from. Is it the human capital of the students that go into the labor market, or is it the knowledge that is produced of the people that do research at these institutions that spills over to the universities, or is it to the firms, or is it a contribution? Is it a combination of both research and human capital, or is it because firms work together with tertiary education institutions? So there is a lot of open questions how this knowledge and this research that is produced at these institutions spills over to the regional economy. And I think, as I mentioned before, looking into heterogeneity in the effects gives you a first idea where to look next. and what mechanisms would be most interesting to analyze. And the second thing is, I think, really important to analyze further is how these different institutions on the tertiary level, how they interact with each other. So we have studies that focus on academic universities. We have now our studies that focus on applied universities of applied science, which are particular tertiary institutions, but we don't really understand how these two types of tertiary education institutions interact and whether they are in concurrence to each other or whether they are both needed to help for an economic innovation system.
So if I think about the first question, the mechanism, I think that's now an area where really the next generation of researchers should go into, particularly using modern types of data. If we say, well, we want to know how that knowledge is then really transferred into the regional economic development, is it the people who move? Is it joint cooperations in projects or whatever Tobias mentioned? That's where you can use new types of data. For example, well, take LinkedIn and then see who cooperated with who is networking with whom, and is there more linkages now between firms and the university people? And actually, that's a project that we are now approaching in Germany. You can look into publication data, you can look into project databases, you can look into home pages where you crawl the information on who is working with whom together to actually see how did they then find together. Is it people moving from the universities as employees to the companies, or is it they do projects together and all of a sudden we have them jointly in new initiatives or whatever else it could be, and that tells us how it works. So that's one avenue with new types of data, I think, that will really open up a new avenue for research. And the second one, as Tobias mentioned, is the clustering in the ecosystems that you have. So what actually does it take as a combination to be successful? And that's what we also work on now in other projects, also for Germany and for Switzerland in the future then, is so is it better if you have regions where you have all different types of institutions like the Max Planck Institute, the Fraunhofer Institute, the research institutes along the whole value chain, and then you have the universities where they teach academic graduates, plus the universities of applied sciences, plus what type of firms, small, medium, large, and what is the most successful avenue actually? Should you all put them always together, or is it particular combinations that you need? Is it a minimum of particular combinations that you need? And I think that's a very important question, because there's the tendency to just spread institutions across the whole country because some regions say we didn't have something, so we now are the next one to get something. Well, but if it's only helpful if you have a particular cluster to build up an ecosystem, then you have to be really careful how you spend your money. I think that's also one of the next avenues that we have to look into. How do you need to develop a region if you do want to develop it? What is the minimum ecosystem that you need, and what are the particular components for different industries? That's, I think, a very interesting point.
Thank you very much for this inspiring also research avenues. Coming to the last question, can you please provide us some insight or advices you may have on how we can apply your findings, how we can best apply them, how we can use them to increase the value, or any advices you have for policymakers or practitioners?
So I would say that broadly speaking, it's really like two advices that come out from our study, and maybe to sell these points, I should very quickly say what we actually find in our study, because otherwise it wouldn't be so clear. So very broadly speaking, we find that these effects actually are heterogeneous across fields of studies and across industries. And we find that only USs or University of Applied Sciences in some very particular fields, especially in chemistry and life sciences and in business management and services, have positive effects on regional firm location. And these positive effects, they are limited to service industries. So for policymakers, we can really say that if they want or if they use tertiary education institutions as a measure of fostering regional economic firm location, they really have to analyze the industry structure beforehand. They open up these institutions, and as Uschi said, it doesn't make sense to just open up an institution in every region, but it would be much more efficient to think of how a tertiary education institution really can match the needs of the regional economy that is around it, to also think of where to locate these institutions. And then a second thing that we also mentioned already for further research, but we still see with our analysis a little bit into this still much under-researched area, is that we find that these industries that are positively affected by universities of applied sciences, they have very different innovation patterns or knowledge patterns than industries that are affected by academic universities. We know that from earlier studies and from studies from other authors, and this gives us an idea that policymakers have to think of where to put a university and where to put the University of Applied Sciences according to the industry needs and the knowledge and innovation patterns that are prevalent in a particular region.
Yeah, and if you want to summarize that, I would say you really have to focus on the match. If you want to support your regional ecosystem, you have to wonder what is the best match for the region that you already have. So scattering around higher education institutions and then hoping that something nice will happen, that I think is one of the results that we would say is not going to happen. You have to study carefully where your regional economy stands, what the potentials are, where there is knowledge already and firms already that can take in additional knowledge that will be created in the region. And then what is it that you need to implement as a higher education institution to foster that knowledge intake? What is it actually that we should provide from a higher education institution? What are the fields? And what is it as a combination of, is it more an industry that needs like basic research, or is it an industry that needs translational research? Are these industries or needs that need to have both of them? And that's actually what I think should be at the core of any politician who tries to foster their region, that they have to try to match whatever you want to implement in that region to what you already have in that region. That does not mean you can't develop the region, but you should start where you already have something and develop from there. And from there, you can broaden your perspective also. Once you have a nice core, then you can add a little bit here, add a little bit there, and broaden the perspective and grow from there. But having something that's like not fitting at all, it's not going to happen. I think that's the major learning for policymaking.
And maybe a second point for policymakers to think of how tertiary education institutions should look like, or on what should they should focus. So our study that shows that other industries then from the effects of academic universities academic universities have impacts on other industries than universities of applied sciences. And this also gives us a hint that it should be important that these institutions have clearly separated portfolios of what they do and what they don't do. So academic universities should really focus on basic research and on education of human capital that is capable in doing basic research, while these universities of applied sciences, they are actually only really important when they stay with their strong focus on applied research, because they really seem to be, and as we said before, this is also interesting for future research, but we think, given our results, that they are a very important complement of academic universities, but only if they keep their strong focus on applied research and not move into the sphere of academic universities and become more basic research institutions.
Thank you very much, Tobias. Thank you very much, Uschi, for your contribution and for sharing your insights with us today. It's extremely important also to continue to have research and follow your research avenues you provided, and also have more research on regional development. For me, I would like to encourage also our readers and listeners to download your paper from the website of Springer, which your paper is in open access, so they can freely download it from the website of Springer. I would like to thank you again for sharing your insights with us today.
Thank you, Christina, for this very inspiring interview.
Thanks for having us.